It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! And you can hear from my voice, I'm under the weather. The patrons got the full story, which gives me a chance to plug the Patreon. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Link is in the description box below. Yeah, they got the whole story of what's going on right now. And some of you newcomers have already become patrons. There's been an influx of 1,500 new subscribers to this channel recently. And some of you have already signed up for Patreon and paid your money each month to get exclusive content and access to polls and cool stuff and all that. And thank you for that. That was unexpected. You guys are far too generous. I've been fortunate of late to get some sort of influx of viewer bases who are really, really nice. And that makes me happy. But for some of you who are new, what is this thing? Why is this chick singing? What is this Feedback Friday? The way my YouTube content is structured is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when I'm not taking a break to focus on lady bits, is original content. When Thursday is patron only content. So it's a special video just for patrons. And then Friday is Feedback Friday, where I read your comments and I respond to them. So let's get right into that. This was obviously sort of a theme week because if I just ranted, it would have been a 2-hour long video. But people gave me a bit of an issue on a completely offhand comment I made about disagreeing with TotalBiscuit on FOV sliders being essential. And some people got really mad at me, going, it's the only way I can play games, and arguing it was a disability, accessibility thing. And I'm one of those people that certain games make me want to puke my guts out. Titanfall is probably the most high profile one. Titanfall makes me want to barf. I can't play it. And I just want to be clear that when I'm saying I don't agree that FOV sliders are essential, I don't believe, I am not as strident as TotalBiscuit was on FOV sliders, field of view sliders. That doesn't mean I don't think they're a nice to have. It also doesn't mean that, yes, the problem is a very narrow field of view makes some people nauseous. So if you can't get an FOV slider working, just make your field of view wider. There are other solutions to this problem. I am just not as, you must do things my way or else. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for that opinion. I'm just saying mine is different because I do create content myself. You know, Lady Bits is obviously a much bigger endeavor, but there are time and budget restrictions, and I can't do all the things I'd like to do, and that's why I'm a little more forgiving. That's all I was saying. And so I ask going forward that people who get on that big, it's funny because we just talked about the disability card. Was it last week? It seems so long ago. Yeah, last week. Don't assume, you know, just because somebody doesn't disclose they have a disability or a mobility challenge, don't assume they don't have one. Disclosure is a very individual thing in disability advocacy. There are reasons some people don't disclose their disabilities in certain forums in their life. So I just wanted to say that. What I just kind of meant by that comment was something another commenter pointed out, which was, I like the part where you talk about your disagreements with TB about frame rates and FOV sliders and game design theory, because that is the stupid shit that makes game discussion fun. Stuff that doesn't matter, not really, but it's fun to discuss and disagree about, and the fact that you disagree doesn't throw his or your character and opinion of one another under the bus. That was the point. Yes. Another comment said that when I think of the term gamer, that's kind of what I think of. Discussing sometimes vigorously the minutiae of games. Yeah, I agree. And that's what I was going for there. Okay? Okay. Awesome. I remember a time when we could just shoot the shit about this stuff and gaming wasn't so ludicrously politicized that it became this big internet war. Now, granted, that was back in the days when some people just said to me, what do you know? You're a girl. And then I'd go, because I'd usually been gaming longer than them, sometimes longer than they'd been alive. And it's like, what do I know? What do you know? I got 10 years of gaming on you, Pisher. But I digress. That is what I meant. Cool. Moving on. There was another issue on not so much issue. Which video is this? The third video, Wednesday's video, that in response, and this, yeah, I kind of meant this. I was kind of just being glib, in response to me saying, I don't know why certain things wouldn't be 100%, but a person said, and yeah, I agree with this. Like I said, I was being glib, but I would say it's frustrating that 15% of people didn't seem to think anything is online harassment, but I always try to keep in mind the contrarian effect. I've read various places that there's always a tithe of respondents that will simply troll the interviewer and give insincere replies, not to mention the other 5 or 10% who will refuse to respond or have no opinion or respond, don't know to any given question. And yes, as I said at the time, Pew does tend to be rather vague in their methodology. So yes, I concur that there is definitely the contrarian effect, vague questions, everything like that. It was just sort of like, I have encountered some people who don't believe that anything online is harassment because they believe that anyone can just go anon and therefore nothing should bother them. Again, I see their point. I have a philosophical disagreement about that, just because anything you use to protect yourself is then a commodity that someone can take away from you. So if you are relying on your anonymity for the ability to speak freely online, I think that's part of the reason doxing became such a big deal. But, it's like, if you need that to express yourself in an open forum, then that is something someone can dig into and find out who you are. And it is far easier to discover someone's identity online than people think it is. So I am not a proponent of anonymity as protection on an ongoing basis. Anonymity is a tool. There's a place for it in some ways, but I don't do anon just because I think some people in a similar position to me have abused it. They've gone on and done some kind of shifty stuff on 4chan and things like that. And I want people to know that anything I'm going to say is said under my name. There are no anonymous accounts I'm lurking out there. I do not have pseudonyms, nothing. I have one Twitter account. I have one Facebook account. I have one Facebook page. Momo has an Instagram account. I have a Snapchat I never use. Stuff like that. I have one of everything so that there is none of this stuff that came up on Gamergate, during Gamergate, of people accusing me of doing different things. No. It's real simple. I keep it simple. But yeah, obviously there's a contrarian effect online. Cool. Moving on. Okay. So, do I want to jump into this one yet? Guess I kind of do. This is the one that a commenter brought up the final lines of the Forbes article, and I completely agree with what they're saying. And I avoided quoting the Forbes article in any way, in part because I didn't want to give it more clicks, but also this irritated me, and I like to be in a calm and kind of jovial, pantsless place when I tackle topics. But here is the comment. The final lines of the article, clearly Bain didn't do enough to atone for his perceived Gamergate sins. And if there is a lesson in all of this, it's that one must make peace and settle any internet beef you have with feminists while you're still living. History is written by the victors, after all. End quote. Translation, if you oppose us, we will vilify you once you're dead. And I was like, when I read that, because first of all, if you're trying to make a moral argument by saying the mob is on my side, that isn't a moral argument. That is a populist argument. And populism has its place. But any student of rhetoric, any student of ethics, usually the truly ethical position is the minority one because it's friggin' hard. Having a strong moral code can often be a lonely place in a world full of people with situational ethics. But this pissed me off on so many levels for the term perceived Gamergate sins. You cannot judge anyone based on their perceived Gamergate sins, because if you do, you have to judge everyone on their perceived Gamergate sins, which means everyone's accountable for all the bad stuff that anybody said about them during that time frame, which means I'm a transphobic racist that doesn't pay my contractors. Yeah, they actually said that about me. On the anti-Gamergate side. The pro-Gamergate side said I was a polygon shill feminist cancer. What was the other one? Oh yeah, I was sexually abused by my uncle when I was a kid, and that's why I hate men. All this happened. Obviously none of it's true, and that's sort of my point. If we are expected to believe all the perceived sins of TotalBiscuit, then fair game to believe all the perceived sins of Anita Sarkeesian and all the perceived sins of Zoe Quinn. You can't have one set of rules for one group of people and another set of rules for another group of people. That ain't the way solid moral reasoning works. So we've already demolished this argument. But the problem is it goes deeper than that. I've been doing outreach work for half my life now. Lord, more. Oh, Lordy. It's never easy. You are going into places that aren't especially interested in what you have to say, and you have to make a persuasive argument. And history is on my side is not a persuasive argument, because history's in the past and you're in the present. You don't know how this is going to shake out. So you can't do that. You can't try to strong arm people into being more caring or tolerant or understanding or any of that good stuff. You have to mount a decent argument. And the thing is, this writer has allied herself with sort of the sex-negative Marxist feminist wing. And that's not the only wing of feminism. It's the wing of feminism that tends to lose the fights historically. Yes, you heard me right. This side tends to lose. The liberal sex-positive wing of feminism, and I'm collapsing wings for the purposes of this discussion, just because it's easier, but the liberal sex-positive wing of feminism tends to be the one that wins the various fights. In the second wave, the sex-negative needs of the many outweigh the needs of individual freedom wing lost hard in its attempts to censor pornography and in general create sort of a moral hygiene where women were concerned. They winnowed their way into academia, but that's about it. They lost the legal battle. They lost the popular battle. So this idea that this particularly sex-negative wing of internet feminism is somehow going to be the victors when history is written, there's no evidence of that. There's no historical precedent for that. And I'm not seeing that in current trends. I'm seeing people like Taylor Swift and Beyonce and Katy Perry freaking rocking it. And I'm seeing these Tumblrina feminists just annoying the shit out of people, including other feminists. And you don't win an argument by annoying people. You don't. Every wave of social change does have its radicals. It does have the people that nobody really feels comfortable around, even especially the moderates, because these radicals tend to go after moderates harder than they go after their full-blown opponents. I haven't figured out yet whether I believe that they're an essential part of movements or whether they're just something we have to sort of grin and bear because they happen. You're always going to get the extremes who feel like they are more pure or more just, because instead of finding sort of a moderate happy medium where we can actually make progress and lasting change, they have to say outrageous crap to show how righteous they are. I suspect it's more that we just can't do anything about it. The benefit they provide is that people go, well, that's nuts, but this more moderate thing, I can get behind this more moderate thing. The problem we're having now is that people don't see the moderate wing of feminism because it's been no platformed. People like me get cut out of the discussion. We get, our work censored. We get banned, shadow and otherwise. We don't get invited to conferences. We're seen as undesirables. We're castless because we threaten the people who hold the power in conferences right now. Now, the funny thing is that the only reason they got in there in the first place is they complained they were being no platform during the feminist sex wars. Of course, the minute they got in there, they did exactly what they were accusing the other people of doing. They wouldn't let anybody with a more sex-positive voice in the door. But this is concerning because you have to let people maintain a sense that their own identity isn't evil while still being allowed to support a social cause that they moderately, like sort of within reason kind of thing, support. This may not seem like a big deal, but having been in the rooms, in order to get politicians to act, something's got to be popular. It can't be something that is only held by, a certain fringe, unless you're talking about, certain fundraising friendly things in the US. I'm not even going to go down that road. But in order to get progressive social change, you have to win hearts and minds. You have to turn the attitudes of the public first to give politicians cover to vote for legislation. That's the only way it works. It doesn't go the other way around because then they get voted out of office and the bill gets overturned. So you can't go screaming at people. And what I have found is it's very easy to get people to agree that certain things like racism and sexism exist in the abstract. The problems break down when you actually look at specific instances. Then no one can agree. And that becomes a real challenge when these extremists poison the word feminism for everyone else. Because most people agree in principle that they want equality for men and women, just like they want equality in the races. They're just not exactly sure what that looks like. And if somebody's yelling at them, they're going to care less and less. And finally start doing some things just out of frustration that are counter to the way you want them to go. And I mean, I saw some stuff in the comments about the whole, I mentioned systemic racism. It was an interesting back and forth. I thought some people were a bit harsh, but it was an interesting discussion that some people were like, systemic racism doesn't exist. And then people started giving all these examples and they're like, but that's not deliberately oppressing black people. Systems are not the individual choices of individuals. They are instances where racial discrimination is a feature, not a bug. And the example I give, because it's the easiest one, is redlining in American cities after the New Deal. This was not seen as racist at the time. This was seen as good financial management. But it was absolutely racist. And if you describe it now, which I will, don't worry, but you see that after the New Deal was brought in to bring America out of the Great Depression. No one was doing especially well. No one was doing well at all during the Great Depression. And so a series of social programs and low-interest government loans, things like that, they were rolled out, but the government had to make sure these were sound investments. And so they had a series of small business loans available to middle-class Americans, which was a big step forward in terms of power for the middle class. But they didn't benefit everyone, because in order to decide whether you were a good risk, the location of their future business and the location where you lived was compared to a map of various cities. Chicago was one of the worst ones, that were divided up into colored neighborhoods. That was an interesting choice of words. The green neighborhoods were the best neighborhoods, the best risk. You could get a loan if you lived in a green neighborhood, no problem. I think it was blue next and then yellow. I don't remember if there was an orange, but red was the worst. Red, you could not get a loan for a business if you lived in a red-lined neighborhood, meaning a neighborhood outlined by red on the city planning map. The presence of any black people in your neighborhood bumped you down a grade, and majority black neighborhoods were automatically redlined no matter what else was going on. So black neighborhoods didn't cultivate business communities. They couldn't fix up their buildings. They couldn't do any of the things that white America was doing at the time to lift themselves out of Depression era economic conditions. So it's not that at some point Black America started just doing worse. It's that white America started doing better and Black America didn't rise. Because of that, then you started seeing declines in the marriage rate in Black America because nobody could afford to be married and things like that. So redlining was a racist social program that continues to have effects to this day. Things like food deserts, lack of businesses and communities, because common spaces make things safer. So if you happen to be born into a red line neighborhood, that's not your fault. But you are going to have a much tougher go of it, cradle to grave. And this doesn't mean that the people alive now had anything to do with racist redlining practices. We just have to recognize that it happened, and this has had lasting social consequences that mean it is harder for Black and Hispanic Americans to get ahead than Asian, South Asian, or white Americans. And when we get into questions of things like the dreaded wage gap, this comes into play as well, because the wage gap is largest. The gender split is largest in a wage gap in African Americans and Hispanics by a sizable margin. So this stuff matters. This stuff matters, but the whole point is to try to get people to understand it without blame. Just because you're a white person doesn't mean you caused redlining. You probably weren't even alive. I wasn't. But it's important to understand it so we don't form negative opinions of somebody based on circumstances they can't control. Similar for, people living in communities currently being demolished by the opioid epidemic, and a lot of those neighborhoods are white. So, this is a complex soup of things, and that's what intersectionalism was supposed to address, the fact that no two people's story is the same. of course, a lot of people say they're intersectionalist, but they don't actually live according to the actual premise of intersectionalism, which includes invisible losses of privilege like physical disability, autism, level of education, all that stuff that can hit white men just as hard as anybody else. So this is why I thought that this comment of perceived Gamergate sins in history is written by the victors. If the rest of the argument had a point, which it didn't, that alone would have demolished it. I think we all know how I feel about that article now, so I'm going to leave it alone. I did this. People earlier in the week questioned my reasons for doing this, and I did this because I shut up about it when I first saw it because I didn't want to spread the poop around. I thought it was low quality bait and I wasn't going to respond. But then I saw Jenna Bain's tweet and saw how hurt she was. That, people weren't speaking up to sort of remind people of what TotalBiscuit's legacy actually was. And I said to her, some of us remember Jenna. We will not let people forget. So this week's video content was my contribution to that. At least I did what I can to provide a more objective record of what went on there. And people asked me about some dumb comments TotalBiscuit made, especially when he was younger. And I couldn't deny he did any of them. But, all I can say is that you don't judge a race by where people start. You judge someone by where they end up. And the thing about a lot of YouTubers is they do start when they're very young and they have to make all their mistakes in public. And so I don't think it's fair to judge the guy based on something he did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, anything like that. I think you need to judge him by the person he became. And he grew up a lot and he learned a lot. And I think that is absolutely laudable. And so that's where I'm going to leave it. Lady Bit's work is next week. I wanted to give you guys a brief thing on the Indiegogo because if you go to the Indiegogo page, you'll see it's at 80%. We did actually end up going over goal based on some stuff that is not reflected. That's why we did the flexible funding thing, because we wanted to give people opportunities to support in different ways. I guess we could have just lowered the amount. I don't like doing that. I like announcing what we need to do the project, because if it's too low, anybody with any kind of savvy head for business is going to go, you can't do what you're promising to do with that amount of money. So, one thing we discovered is Indiegogo doesn't like certain MasterCards. So we had to let some people pay via PayPal because Indiegogo rejected their payment. We also, there was a $1,500 have Ed come to your town for a party and all that stuff. Some of those are still in the works. There's 3 or 4 that are still, they couldn't get it together by the deadline, but they all still are still working on it. It looks very much like it's going to come through. So as you see, we're already very, very close to goal just with those amounts added in. And then we've had some donations of equipment. I don't know quite what they are yet. I have only been helping with this because I'm providing content to the service. I was not running the campaign. But yeah, there's been sizable donations of equipment. So with that all combined, we are a healthy amount over the $35,000 goal. So yay to those of you who signed up and gave your $25 for the boot camp. There's 45 of you. Hope you enjoy it. That is, I'm going to start working on that in between the 2 remaining Lady Bit scripts after this one. So I will try to get it out as fast as I possibly can. You'll like it. It's useful information. It's going to be fun. It's me. So the 45 of you that took me up on that, you're going to well get your money's worth. and I'm going to look forward to doing it. So that's it for me this week. Down to the Lady Bits hole next week. Have a great weekend. If your weather is anything like it is here, enjoy the sunshine. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being great. Thanks for your high quality feedback. You guys are the best.